Hi, I'm Elizabeth Romero, and today I'll be presenting on the mental disorder Munchausen syndrome by proxy, also known as factitious disorder. So what is Munchausen syndrome by proxy? Munchausen syndrome by proxy is considered to be a compulsive disorder and is actually a serious mental illness. And therefore, individuals with Munchausen syndrome have severe emotional difficulties as well. Munchausen syndrome, people with this disorder, they basically fabricate a disease or create symptoms that aren't there or exaggerate symptoms that are there. And they usually do this in Munchausen by proxy is done by the caregiver, which is usually the mom, and they'll fabricate stories of their children to make them appear more sick. The victims could be anyone in their care. It could even be a pet. However, most commonly it could be elderly, it could be a person that has a kind of disability, or children. And the majority of people with this problem, with this mental disorder, are actually mothers between the ages of 20 to 40. And for this presentation, that is what I'm going to focus on, which is the most common. That is a mother causing harm to their child, usually under the age of 4, but it could go on for years. Munchausen by proxy is considered to be a form of child abuse, and it is a crime. Medical healthcare experts describe it as medical child abuse. The mental disorder Munchausen syndrome was first described by a British psychiatrist named Dr. Richard Asher, who linked the factitious behavior with Baron von Munchausen. There was a man named Baron von Munchausen who served in the Russian army, and he retired in 1760. Munchausen was famous in Hanover, Germany, because he would tell these exaggerated stories about the time when he was a soldier, and people began to know him for these exaggerated stories. And so that's where the name came from. And the reason Dr. Asher named it Munchausen is because that is exactly what these people do. They fabricate or exaggerate stories. There have been many cases of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. I find it interesting that it's actually not considered to be a very common disorder. It's probably because not many are discovered, and that's a very sad thing too, because kids are being abused, but nobody knows about it because the parents, or in this case the mom, presents herself to be as a very loving, caring, and concerned mom, so it's very difficult to detect. Also, Munchausen syndrome by proxy is actually very different from most other mental disorders. In fact, the person with this mental disorder is not really the person that suffers. It's actually the person that is under their care that suffers the damage. That's why this is so different from many of the other mental disorders. For reasons that are not yet fully known or understood, the caretaker, in this case, of course, the mom, causes harm to her child in order to gain attention from the family, friends, and especially from the healthcare providers. The mother makes the child sick enough that the child will require long hospital stays, and the child will go through many unnecessary diagnostic procedures and even surgeries. Therefore, the mother in this case is known to be a perpetrator because she's causing harm to her child. The perpetrators enjoy the attention, sympathy, and also the admiration they receive from being the parent of a sick child. The perpetrator deceives everyone they know, as well as medical professionals caring for their child. There have been many cases of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, and some of them are so severe that they have made world news. Here are two of the cases that I found most interesting. One of the earliest cases of Munchausen by proxy is with Mary Beth Tinning, and it took place in Schenectady, New York State from 1967 to 1985. Mary Beth Tinning had 9 children that suddenly died before the age of 4. It was later suspected that all 9 children were murdered by Mary Beth herself. There was only one child named Jennifer, which possibly died of natural causes about 8 days after birth. It is known that Mary Beth would bring her infants to the emergency room very frequently, one after the other. The infants were treated for many symptoms, including symptoms of seizures and cardiac arrest. The people in her community had started to spread rumors saying that Mary Beth had a death gene. By the time Mary Beth's fifth child died, the doctors came up with a theory that it was simply a case of SIDS. Unfortunately, Mary Beth Tinney was only convicted in the death of her youngest child, Tammy Lynn. She was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life. She is still in prison today. One of the most recent famous cases of Munchausen by proxy was the case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. This case is so talked about that it has actually created more awareness about this mental disorder that not many people knew existed. What made this case so popular is that the victim, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, after suffering at the hands of her mother for all her life, finally took matters into her own hands and killed her mother. Gypsy's mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, claimed that Gypsy had numerous diagnoses, including leukemia and muscular dystrophy. When Gypsy was small, Dee Dee exaggerated any small spit up and claimed Gypsy was not able to eat. For this reason, Gypsy had a feeding tube for most of her life, despite being able to eat and drink. Through this feeding tube, Dee Dee Blanchard was suspected to have administered all kinds of medications. She medicated Gypsy either to cause illness symptoms or to keep Gypsy in a sedative-like state to control and prevent her from talking. As Gypsy got older, she wanted to do more in her life and was tired of acting as a sick child. She found her birth certificate and realized she was older than her mother had led her to believe. Gypsy felt desperate to get out of her wheelchair and be a normal person her age. She wanted to go out with friends, and she also wanted to have a boyfriend. However, no matter how much she tried, which included running away from home, Dee Dee would always find her and bring her back home. Dee Dee also threatened and beat Gypsy to keep her in the wheelchair and under her full control. Gypsy eventually had enough and persuaded her boyfriend, which she met online, to kill her mother, Dee Dee. She plotted the entire murder and even purchased a knife that would be left out for her boyfriend to use for this murder. The saddest part of the story is that after an entire life of abuse, Gypsy ends up in prison for finally fighting for her freedom. While she now understands how terrible her actions were, she says that at the time, she acted out of desperation. Gypsy said she regrets everything and only wishes her mother would be alive and be the one sitting in prison paying for what she did to her. It is difficult to identify people with Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Healthcare workers usually do not suspect it because the mother appears to be loving, caring, and very concerned about her child's illness. However, the mother is deliberately making the child's symptoms worse. Mothers with Munchausen syndrome by proxy create or exaggerate a child's symptoms in several ways, which include lying about a child's symptoms, manipulating tests, for example, contaminating a urine sample with blood, falsifying medical records, inducing symptoms by poisoning, suffocating, starving, injecting feces, and/or causing infection. To diagnose a person with Munchausen syndrome by proxy, experts look for specific signs. Signs of Munchausen syndrome by proxy include the following. It's often a mom between the ages of 20 to 40. She acts very friendly, cooperative with healthcare providers, appears very concerned about her child's health. She's actually very interested and knowledgeable about medical details. She enjoys the attention of healthcare professionals, becomes very angry with doctors if they tell her nothing is wrong. She has problems with identity and self-esteem. She may have experienced Munchausen syndrome herself, meaning she may have also exaggerated her own illness or symptoms in the past. The exact cause is not known, and this disorder is not fully understood. However, the immediate obvious sign of Munchausen syndrome is the mother's desire for attention and sympathy from doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. In addition, individuals with the disorder may find satisfaction in deceiving people they think of as important and powerful, such as doctors and psychiatrists. Also, moms with Munchausen by proxy often enjoy the free gifts and trips that come with having a sick child. The first step in Munchausen syndrome treatment is to stop the individual's dangerous actions towards themselves or others. Subsequently, psychotherapy is the most effective treatment for addressing the root causes of this disorder. However, most individuals with Munchausen syndrome refuse to admit that they have the disorder. Additionally, people with Munchausen by proxy usually deny that they did anything wrong. Thus, they resist treatment and therefore therapy will not be effective. In fact, most of the time treatment is mandatory and ordered by the court. Treatment will usually include cognitive behavioral therapy. This seeks to change the thinking and behavior of the individual. They learn to channel negative emotions in ways that do not involve harming themselves or their children. There's also family therapy. The family therapy, relatives of the individual learn how to stop reinforcing the individual's behavior. However, individuals with Munchausen syndrome are often estranged from their family. Therapy generally ranges from $65 an hour to $250 an hour or more. An annual average can range anywhere from $15,000 to as much as $200,000, which include child therapy for the victim depending on the severity. So it's really difficult to know exactly what costs will be. However, in the end, the monetary cost is nothing if it helps at all. Some victims, for example, will find it more difficult than others to live on a normal life. Therefore, you cannot really put a price on happiness and recovery. As for the perpetrator, most of the time they do end up in prison because it is a form of child abuse. Question number 1. What is the name of the doctor that named the mental disorder Munchausen syndrome? The answer is Dr. Richard Asher. Question number 2. Name at least one type of therapy mentioned here that has been known to be effective for treating the mothers diagnosed with Munchausen by proxy. And the answer is tie them to a tree and beat them for at least 1 month. Just kidding. The answer is treatment will usually include cognitive behavioral therapy or family therapy. Question number 3, true or false? Many mothers with Munchausen by proxy work in healthcare, such as nurses. True. Most people with Munchausen by proxy are mothers with small children, often work in healthcare settings, and know a lot about medical care according to psychiatry. Again, that is most, not all. If you suspect any type of child abuse, please report it. Do not let the child continue to suffer. Thank you.